Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my favourite books that I read in 2020. It's currently the 29th of December and I've read 60 books so far this year, which is the most I've ever read. And in the new year I'm going to be doing a full video of my reading stats where I'll be talking about every book I've read. But for my favourites today I've got 11 books to talk about. I tried to narrow it down to 10 but I really struggled to decide which one I should cut out. So we have an odd number of books to talk about. Not to get like too deep or anything, but I feel like this year has been a little bit of a weird reading year because of like the pandemic and everything else going on. I feel like my emotions have been kind of like dulled like just a little bit. So the kind of like a 5-star book feeling when you read a book and like you just know straight away that's a 5-star, like that feeling where you're just like so overwhelmed and loving the book so much. I struggled to feel like that this year. So some of these books that got 5 stars didn't necessarily give me that feeling, but I know deep down they are 5-star books. And some of the books I'm talking about today I gave 4.5 or 4 stars, but I love them a lot and the books that have really stuck with me this year, so they're being included on my list. I hope that made sense. But anyways, enough waffling, let's get on with the books. Apart from the last one, which I've decided is my favourite book of the year, I'm basically going to go in chronological order of when I read these books for no particular reason really, other than I wanted to, and that's just how I planned out the video. So if you watched my favourite books video last year, you will know that I tend to read like kind of the popular hyped books on BookTube a year after everybody else. So with that in mind, the first book I'm going to be talking about is Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I read it back in January for my video where I read 5 of the Goodreads Choice Award winners, and I reread it again this month in December. I loved this book. I had tears in my eyes at the end. I was genuinely so impressed at this debut novel. I loved the characters, the story and what it stands for. In case you don't know by now, this book is about Alex Claremont Diaz, who is the first son, so his mum is the President of the United States. Basically at an event there's a bit of an altercation with him and Prince Henry from England. It ends up being shown all across the tabloids and they basically have to do damage control and they have to like basically fake their friendship. That friendship ends up becoming something more. Especially reading this book again after the 2020 presidential election, it felt even more relevant and hopeful. In the acknowledgements, the author, she does say that this book was kind of written in response to the 2016 election because she kind of wanted to create kind of like an alternate universe which was escapist and hopeful. I'm sure like when I read it in January it was a hopeful story about politics, but reading it again in December just hit me even more. I guess it helps as well that the timeline of this book is from late 2019 to November 2020. So even though, you know, Casey McQuiston didn't entirely predict the results of the US election, seeing certain red states turn blue and the passion Alex had for mobilising Democrat voters in red states, that kind of thing hit me even more this time around. And as I already mentioned in my anticipated releases video, I'll definitely be reading whatever Casey McQuiston comes out with in the future. Next is Normal People by Sally Rooney. This book is about Connell and Marianne. They're two very different people. Connell's kind of like the popular jock character whilst Marianne is quite unpopular. And basically Connell's mother is a cleaner for Marianne's house, and then one day when he goes to pick his mum up, himself and Marianne start a conversation in her kitchen and it all goes from there. It follows them throughout university about them kind of like coming together, going apart. It's quite like a tender love story, I guess. In my version of the book, in a synopsis, it describes it as a story of mutual fascination, friendship and love. I was super apprehensive going into this as it has been extremely hyped but also received mixed reviews. I did feel frustrated in the first half of the book purely because I was tired of these characters just messing around and I just want them to get their shit together and properly talk to each other. However, that feeling of frustration did dissipate, which I am glad about, but it really stayed with me in the months after I read it. Plus with the TV show adaptation being released this year, it perhaps strangely made me love the book even more because the TV show was so close to like the original book. So I guess this is a 5-star book for me. I overall thought that the book was excellent. I loved the writing. I had a lot of sympathy for both of the characters. They both have so much trauma and so many issues that I guess the miscommunication almost made sense in a way. I read this as well switching between the physical and the audiobook, so I would definitely recommend the audiobook, especially if you love a nice calming Irish accent. A bit of a repeat from last year. Next is Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. I just had to mention this because it was a favourite, duh. In this one they go on a school trip to Paris and Nick and Charlie become an official couple. This volume talks a lot more about mental health, and Charlie opens up a lot about the struggles he's had, and I know that's going to continue into volume 4. This series is just so wholesome and happy and nice. It does obviously, like, it does still talk about serious stuff, but it is just a generally lovely, light-hearted book, and I think if you need a pick-me-up, pick up the series. So yeah, this is one of my favourite series in general, and I think whenever a new volume comes out, it's going to become a favourite. Next is The Black Flamingo by Dean Atter. This tells the story of Michael from the age of 5 to age 18 when he's in his first year of university. His story is told entirely in verse, and it was such a beautiful and intriguing story to read. Michael writes poetry himself, and it was wonderful to see the development of his poetry throughout his life. One of the big themes of the story is identity, and Michael trying to find where he fits in within all the intersections of his identity. His dad is Jamaican, his mum is Greek Cypriot, and he's gay, and he struggles to find a place where he perfectly fits in. I read it in February and I hadn't seen many people talk about it, but more now, which is great. I did give this book 4 stars, but I thought about this book so much this year and I would strongly recommend it to anybody, so it's going in my favourites. Next is Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. This is about our title character, and I guess on a basic level it's about her dealing with and going through a breakup from a boyfriend, but it is about a lot more than that, like mental health and the experience of a black Jamaican woman in her mid-20s living in London. I loved this. It was a very funny and incredibly raw book as well. I loved Queenie as a person, and my heart broke for it on multiple occasions. Some of the stuff she went through as well hit pretty close to home. So trigger warning for anxiety, panic attacks, also parental abuse, sexual assault and racism. She is self-destructive and kind of a hot mess, so I can kind of see why people would dislike her, but I don't think the author ever presents her actions as a good thing. I definitely feel like this is a book I'm going to be recommending and gifting to all of my friends who are also in their early to mid-20s. Then we have an audiobook I listened to, which is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a young adult memoir manifesto detailing the author's experiences growing up as a black queer person, following him from his childhood right through to his college years. I would suggest looking up the content warnings for this book before reading it, as it does contain some very heavy and triggering things. It is a beautiful and stunning book told through essays. It is very accessible for a younger audience as well, as he talks about all the lessons he's learnt at all these points in his life. I would definitely recommend the audiobook, and I think this is one of these books that is like essential reading, kind of similar to Queenie in that it's essential reading in that you should read about experiences that aren't your own, about people who are different to you, both in terms of race and sexuality. Then we have another audiobook I listened to, King and the Dragonflies by Case and Callender. That was the first Case and Callender book I read this year, and I do want to give an honourable mention to Felix Ever After, which I also really liked, but I didn't quite make it into my favourite books of the year. And King and the Dragonflies is about 12-year-old Kingston James, who is sure his brother Khalid has turned into a dragonfly. When Khalid unexpectedly passed away, he shed what was his first skin for another to live down by the bayou in the small Louisiana town. Khalid still visits in dreams, and King must keep these secrets to himself as he watches grief transform his family. It would be easy if King could talk with his best friend, Sandy Sanders, but just days before he died, Khalid told King to end their friendship after overhearing a secret about Sandy, that he thinks he might be gay. When Sandy goes missing and King finds his former best friend hiding in a tent in his backyard, he agrees to help Sandy escape from his abusive father, and the two begin an adventure as they build their own private paradise down by the bayou and among the dragonflies. As their friendship is reunited, he's forced to confront questions about himself and the reality of his brother's death. This is a middle grade book, and I loved how King was imperfect and made mistakes. It's fair that you're actually seeing that in middle grade, I think, even though it's realistic to how children actually are. I loved the audiobook as it just made what was happening even more emotional, like the feeling of being a child and telling your parents something serious and they don't believe you. That was the thing that kind of made me tear up the most of this book. Again, this book should be essential reading for every child and every adult really, as they could probably learn some lessons as well. And yeah, this is such a beautiful and heart-wrenching book. If you are into middle grade, I would definitely recommend starting with that if you want to get into Case and Callender's books. Next up we have something a little different, I guess. We have The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I completely own this one to Meg with Books. She has talked about this book on her channel a lot this year, and she essentially convinced me to read it. This is the first murder mystery book I've ever read, so my initial reaction to finish this book was like, wow, this shit is wild. And that might seem potentially hyperbolic, but I just thought this book was amazing and so well crafted. I truly didn't see the last twist or many of the other twists actually coming. I've seen other reviews saying that this book was predictable and they guessed the twists, but please just acknowledge the fact that I'm new to this genre completely. So as I was reading it, I was just like taking it easy, just going along for the ride, not really predicting anything. This book is about a wedding that takes place on an island off the coast of Ireland, and a murder happens. That's literally the first chapter of the book, and the whole book is about like the events leading up to the wedding and the murder, because in the first chapter you know somebody's been murdered but you don't know exactly who. So as well as finding out who actually committed the murder, you're finding out who has been murdered, and the story is told from multiple POVs, including the bride herself, the wedding planner, the best man, the +1 and the maid of honour. I knew before going into this that the characters were going to be unlikable, but I really didn't mind that much, as well obviously they were horrible people, most of them, but it's kind of balanced out of the characters I had sympathy for, like Hannah, who was the +1, and Olivia, who is the bridesmaid. For me overall this book was definitely worth the hype, and I think I'll be reading whatever Lucy Foley puts out next. Then we have a sci-fi. It's Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I talked about this book a lot in my 1000 Doors readathon vlog, but this is the sequel to Illuminate, the second in the series. A series I started reading in 2016 and I only just finished reading this year. So the whole like overall story of the Illuminate files is basically like a war between space mega corporations. But in this one we follow Hannah, who is the daughter of the captain on the ship, and Nick, who is basically the bad boy and a member of a notorious crime family, and them trying to defend their home, the space station, because in the space station they have been all essentially taken hostage. This was the easiest 5-star rating I've given all year. Such incredible characters. Hannah, particularly in this one, was my favourite. I like my favourite throughout the whole series. The plot and the pacing was incredible too. It was so enthralling and captivating. I'm just so happy that I finally read this series and I enjoyed it. It was worth the wait, I think. Then we have Beach Read by Emily Henry, which is an adult romance. This is about January. She's an author typically of romance or like women's fiction, and she's got writer's block, so she goes to this cabin in Michigan during the summer, and her neighbour happens to be a guy called Gus, who was her college rival, who is an author of like literary fiction, and he also has writer's block, and they decided to swap genres. So Gus will write a romance, January will write a literary fiction novel, and whoever gets the book sold first like wins. But obviously with this challenge set, feelings start to flourish. I can perhaps understand why some fans of romance don't like this book that much, as it is a little romance light. However, I'm typically lukewarm about romance and I really love this book, and I think it definitely deserves all the buzz it's been getting this year. I think the fact that the characters were so complex and had so much trauma that was explored as Gus's and January's relationship developed, really made it for me. I've seen some people describe this as more literary than romance, which I can definitely agree with. So if you typically don't like romance, I would say read this book. Give it a try. Then lastly we have what I think is my favourite book of the year, and that is Loveless by Alice Oseman. The one that I guess emotionally hit me the most. This book is about Georgia. She has never been in love, never kissed anyone, but ends up kind of discovering more about her sexuality as she explores asexuality and aromanticism. I don't personally identify on the asexual spectrum, but so many of the things that Georgia went through I could relate to as a queer woman, such as realising that some crushes were just pretending, and to be honest I think everyone can relate to the fear of being alone forever. Plus the first year of university vibes brought back so many memories, including the Domino's pizza stall at Freshers Fair and Freshers Week not really being worth the hype. I love any book that has a good friendship group. And just an ensemble of characters, which is one of this book's strengths. I've never seen a book before explore platonic love, and honestly more books need to, because it is so pure and heartwarming. Sunil in particular, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, I do apologise. They were a favourite. They are basically George's asexual guardian angel, and they're just such a pure human. The writing in general too was just so on point. Alice Oseman I feel really encapsulates the way teenagers actually speak, and yeah, I love this, and I'm so glad that an Ace Arrow coming out story exists in the world. I hope this book finds its way to those who need it, as I feel like it could be very helpful to a lot of people. So here we have it. These are 9 of the 11 favourite books I had this year. If these books were any of your favourites, please let me know in the comments down below. or just tell me what your favourite books were in general that you read this year. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you fancy. I hope you have a great day and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!